Dr. Emily Anderson stood motionless before the holographic display, her reflection ghosting across the quantum glass windows of her Pentagon office. The Galactic Council's preliminary assessment of humanity scrolled past her eyes in shimmering alien script, automatically translated by the neural interface at the base of her skull. As Earth's leading genopsychologist, she had expected some misunderstandings from the Council, but nothing quite like this. "They really believe we're afraid of conflict," she murmured, her voice carrying a mix of disbelief and something darker. Behind her, General Marcus Hayes shifted in his quantum alloy chair, the material adjusting to his movement with barely a whisper. "Should we correct their assumption?" he asked, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the holographic reports. Decades of military service had taught him the value of being underestimated. Emily traced a finger through the air, highlighting key passages of the Council's assessment. "Look at their evidence, our numerous peace treaties, our anti-war movements, our persistent pursuit of diplomatic solutions." She paused, selecting a particularly telling quote. "They've labeled us as conflict-averse to the point of psychological paralysis." The general's laugh was brief and without humor. Psychological paralysis. That's rich, coming from a species that hasn't updated their military doctrine in 3,000 years. Outside the reinforced windows, Washington, D.C. sprawled beneath them, its buildings gleaming with solar collection panels and atmosphere scrubbers. The city looked peaceful, productive, exactly as humanity wanted it to appear. Few would guess that beneath the surface of every major human settlement lay military facilities that could transform these centers of commerce into fortresses within hours. "The Council's synopsychologists are making a classic error," Emily continued, pulling up her own analysis alongside the alien assessment. "They're interpreting our behavior through their own cultural lens. To them, our dedication to avoiding conflict can only stem from fear." Hayes stood, walking to the window. His reflection showed a man in his 50s, silver-streaked hair cut to regulation length, his dress uniform bearing the subtle insignia of Earth's combined defense force. And they've never asked themselves why a species that's supposedly terrified of conflict maintains such extensive military histories, why we document every battle, every war, every conflict in excruciating detail. "They believe it's trauma response," Emily replied, highlighting another section of the report. "According to this, our detailed war records are evidence of our species' collective psychological scarring. They think we're documenting these conflicts the way a trauma victim might compulsively revisit their experiences." The general's expression hardened. "Not documentation. Education." Emily nodded, closing the holographic displays with a gesture. "We don't record wars because we're afraid of them, but because we respect their cost. Every conflict teaches us something new, about strategy, about technology, about ourselves, and about our enemies," Hayes added quietly. A soft chime announced a new transmission from the Council. Emily opened it with another gesture, and both humans watched as a new message materialized in the air between them. The Council had reached its final assessment. Earth would be offered membership, but under restricted status due to their perceived psychological limitations. "They're going to try to strong-arm us," Hayes said, reading between the lines of the diplomatic language. "They think we'll fold at the first show of force." Emily walked to her desk, placing her hand on an ornate wooden box, a deliberate anachronism in the high-tech office. Inside lay a book, its pages made of actual paper, Sun Tzu's The Art of War. She had lost count of how many times she'd read it, finding new insights with each pass. "Let them think what they want," she said, her fingers tracing the ancient binding. "After all, Sun Tzu said it best. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak." Hayes nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "They see what they expect to see. A species that fears war because we work so hard to avoid it. But they never asked themselves the obvious question," Emily concluded, looking out over the peaceful city below. Why would a species that truly feared war become so very, very good at waging it? Ambassador Jessica Reynolds maintained perfect posture as the crystalline ships descended through New York's skyline, their prismatic surfaces refracting sunlight across the city in dazzling patterns. The display was meant to intimidate, a show of overwhelming technological superiority. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that even now, quantum sensors throughout the city were analyzing every aspect of the Council vessel's construction. Magnificent, aren't they? High Observer Cuthrix's voice carried the particular resonance common to his species, a sound somewhere between wind chimes and grinding metal. The 12-foot-tall alien gestured with one of his 4 upper limbs toward his fleet. We found that such displays help ease transitions for newer species. They're certainly impressive, Jessica replied, her diplomatic training helping her maintain an expression of polite interest. She stood at the center of the United Earth Government Plaza, surrounded by a carefully curated delegation of human representatives. Every member had been chosen not just for their roles, but for their ability to project exactly what the Council expected to see, a species desperate to avoid conflict. Cuthrix's secondary eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture her xenocultural training identified as satisfaction. We found that clear demonstrations of power differentials reduced the likelihood of unfortunate misunderstandings. Behind her, Jessica heard the subtle click of Dr. William Nash's neural transmitter, a sound that would seem like a nervous tick to the aliens, but was actually transmitting detailed scans to military analysts worldwide. The Council's demonstration was providing humanity with more tactical data than a year of long-range observation. The Council, Cuthrix continued, his translator converting his harmonics into crisp English, has determined that Earth requires guidance. Your species' documented fear of conflict makes you vulnerable. We offer protection in exchange for certain concessions. Jessica noticed the slight emphasis on protection and allowed a flicker of uncertainty to cross her face. Exactly what Cuthrix would expect. What kind of concessions? The High Observer's upper limbs moved in a gesture meant to be reassuring. Nothing too demanding. Merely the placement of Council advisors in key positions within your government. The integration of your military forces under Council command. The sharing of certain resources. All standard procedures for species at your level of development. Through her neural link, Jessica received confirmation that the transmission was being broadcast globally. Humanity needed to witness this, needed to understand what was coming. She glanced at her tablet, pretending to review the terms while actually monitoring the activation of defensive protocols across Earth's major cities. Beneath New York, massive underground structures were quietly shifting to military configurations. "This is quite sudden," she said, letting her voice waver slightly. "Our people will need time to consider." "Time," Cuthrix interrupted, his harmonics sharpening, "is a luxury you may not have. The galaxy is not always kind to unprotected species." His secondary eyes pulsed with patterns that her training recognized as threatening. The Council's patience has limits. Jessica bowed her head, a gesture the Council species interpreted as submission. "We'll consider your proposal carefully," she said softly. "How long do we have to provide an answer?" 3 of your Earth months, Cuthrix announced, his tone making it clear this was generous. "Choose wisely, Ambassador Reynolds. The Council's protection is not offered lightly, nor withdrawn gently." As the alien delegation departed, their crystalline ships rising into the afternoon sky, Jessica maintained her diplomatic smile. Only once they were out of visual range did she allow herself to straighten, her expression hardening. "Send word to the Defense Council," she instructed her neural link. "Operation Looking Glass is now active." She turned to Dr. Nash, who was already processing the scan data. "What did we learn?" "Their ship's crystal structure, its artificial metamaterial. Advanced, but not unbreakable. We've already identified 3 potential structural weaknesses." Jessica nodded, watching the last shimmer of the Council ships vanish into the clouds. 3 months, she mused. They think they're giving us time to accept the inevitable. Instead, they've given us exactly what we need: time to prepare. Above them, New York's skyline remained peaceful, its quantum blast buildings reflecting the setting sun. But beneath the surface, humanity was already shifting to a war footing, precision-crafted gears turning in a machine the Council never saw, because they never bothered to look past humanity's carefully constructed facade of fear. Colonel David Murphy stood in the heart of Cheyenne Mountain, surrounded by holographic displays showing the greatest military deception in human history. Council surveillance drones circled Earth's major shipyards, dutifully reporting on what appeared to be panicked retrofitting of civilian vessels. The aliens watched humans scramble to reinforce hull plating and install basic shield generators, exactly what they expected from a frightened species preparing for submission. "Status report," Murphy commanded, his voice echoing off the crystalline quantum processors lining the chamber walls. Lieutenant Ashley Cooper's fingers danced across her neural interface. "Operation Paper Tiger proceeding as planned, sir. The Council's observers are focusing entirely on our visible activities. They haven't detected any of the subsurface installations." Murphy allowed himself a grim smile. Above ground, humanity appeared to be struggling with basic military conversions. Meanwhile, beneath the world's oceans and mountains, automated factories were producing advanced weapon systems that had been designed and refined over decades of theoretical warfare preparation. "What's the status of the Heritage Project?" he asked, turning to Dr. Benjamin Wright, the operations chief historian. "Online and scaling," Wright replied, adjusting his neural interface's processing speed. "We're running every military strategy from human history through quantum simulation. The AI is adapting ancient tactics for space warfare faster than we anticipated." On the main display, a simulation showed Alexander the Great's pincer movement at Gaugamela being transformed into a three-dimensional space combat maneuver. Beside it, Napoleon's artillery tactics were being recalculated for energy weapon configurations. "The Council thinks we document wars out of fear," Wright continued, his eyes reflecting the shifting tactical displays. "They don't understand that we've been preparing for this moment for centuries. Every conflict, every battle, every skirmish in human history has been a lesson. And we're very good students." A priority alert flashed across their neural feeds. Murphy opened it with a thought, revealing Admiral Sarah Harrison's stern face. "Colonel, the Council's latest surveillance sweep missed something significant. Forwarding the data now." The central hologram shifted to show a massive structure hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean. The Leviathan Shipworks had just completed its first production run, a fleet of advanced warships disguised as deep-sea mining platforms. "They're not even looking in the right direction," Harrison said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "Their psychological profile says we build defenses in space, where we can see threats coming. They never considered we'd hide our real shipyards underwater." Murphy nodded, studying the designs. The vessels incorporated centuries of naval warfare experience, adapted for space combat. Their weapon systems were disguised as mining equipment, their quantum drives masked by what appeared to be crude fusion reactors. "What about Project Longbow?" he asked, switching to a secure channel. "Ready for implementation," Cooper reported. "We've modified 50 civilian communications satellites with prototype quantum weapons. The Council dismissed them as primitive broadcast platforms, exactly as predicted." The room fell silent as a new alert appeared. Council ships had begun their daily patrol of Earth's orbital space. On the surface, they'd see exactly what they expected: a frightened civilization making token preparations while obviously preparing to submit. "They're so convinced of our fear that they're not even conducting deep scans anymore," Wright observed, watching the alien vessels pass by. "Their latest psychological report suggests we're displaying typical avoidance behaviors of a species preparing for voluntary submission." Murphy's neural interface highlighted a final status update. The Ancient Wars History Division had just completed its analysis of guerrilla warfare tactics from throughout human history. The data would be crucial for the asymmetric warfare phase of their response plan. "Let them think we're afraid," Murphy said, watching the Council ships continue their predictable patrol pattern. "Let them think these 3 months are breaking our will." He turned to face his team, each member representing decades of careful preparation disguised as academic research or civilian development. "Humanity doesn't fear war. We respect it enough to prepare for it properly." Above them, Council observers reported another day of watching humans fumble with basic military preparations. None of them thought to question why a species so supposedly afraid of conflict had maintained military historians, strategists, and theorists throughout their entire peaceful period. None of them wondered why every human civilian vessel included power systems vastly more robust than their stated purposes required. They would learn these lessons soon enough. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Turner watched the Council warships approach Mars through the Unity's supposedly civilian sensor array. The mining vessel's bridge crew maintained their practiced routine, operating drilling equipment that could transform into weapon systems with a single command. Council vessels entering weapons range of Peterson Martine's colony. Her second-in-command, Jack Morrison, reported quietly. His fingers hovered over controls disguised as mineral analysis equipment. Rachel nodded, keeping her expression neutral. The Council had grown impatient with Earth's delayed response to their ultimatum. Now, 2 months into their 3-month deadline, they had decided to provide what they called a motivational demonstration. "They're charging weapons," Jack announced, his neural feed providing detailed analysis of the Council ship's energy signatures. Standard intimidation configuration, just like the simulations predicted. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. The Council's military doctrine hadn't changed in 3,000 years. They had no reason to change it. No species had ever refused their protection once a show of force was delivered. The first shots hit Peterson Martine's colony's outer dome. The Council ships used precisely calculated power levels, enough to crack the dome and trigger emergency protocols, but not enough to cause casualties. They expected panic, chaos, and a desperate call for mercy from Earth. Colony emergency systems responding exactly as planned, Jack reported, watching the situation unfold. Civilian evacuation protocols running at 100% efficiency. Council observers are recording everything. Rachel straightened in her command chair. "Send the signal." Throughout the solar system, humanity's carefully orchestrated response began. The Emergency War Powers Act activated, transforming seemingly disparate civilian operations into a coordinated military force. Hidden weapon systems emerged from their disguised configurations. Defense platforms that the Council had dismissed as primitive satellites revealed their true capabilities. Council ships maintaining standard intimidation formation, Jack said, his voice tight with anticipation. "They're not even running active scans. They don't expect resistance." Rachel's neural interface connected her directly to the Unity's combat systems. The mining vessel's outer hull reconfigured, revealing weapon ports disguised as equipment hatches. Throughout the ship, crew members who had trained for this moment, while maintaining perfect cover as civilian miners moved to battle stations. "Remember Admiral Nelson," Rachel said, referring to one of the countless historical battles they had studied. "The enemy expects us to follow their doctrine. Let's show them something from our own history instead." The Unity's engines fired, executing a maneuver that would have been familiar to any student of Earth's age of sail. Like wooden ships crossing the T of an enemy fleet, Rachel's vessel and its hidden squadron moved to exploit weaknesses in the Council's formation that had been obvious to human military analysts, but unthinkable to the Council's rigid tactical doctrine. "Weapons hot," Jack announced. "All ships in position." Rachel took a deep breath. This moment would change everything. Execute pattern Trafalgar. The Unity's mining lasers reconfigured, transforming into weapons that combine centuries of human military innovation with modern technology. Across her neural feed, Rachel saw other disguised ships moving into position, executing battle plans derived from humanity's long history of warfare. The Council ships never stood a chance. Their commanders, trained in unchanging doctrine that had served them for millennia, couldn't adapt to tactics they had never encountered. Energy weapons struck from angles their shields weren't configured to defend. Electronic warfare systems, hidden in what appeared to be atmospheric processing units, disrupted their communications. Council vessels attempting to regroup, Jack reported, watching the alien ships try to respond to the unexpected assault. They're transmitting surrender signals. Rachel nodded, but kept the weapons ready. Send our response in clear text, all frequencies. The message was simple, transmitted in the Council's own language. The Peterson-Martinez colony is under human protection. Your demonstration has been noted. We now offer our own. In high orbit above Mars, the Council ships found themselves surrounded by vessels that had appeared to be simple mining platforms moments before. Their crews watched in shock as humanity's facade of fear and weakness evaporated, revealing the warriors they had been all along. On Earth, the Defense Council received the battle update with grim satisfaction. The Council had sought to motivate humanity through fear. Instead, they had learned the first lesson about human warfare. Appearance and reality were often very different things. Admiral James Walker stood before the newly formed Human Defense Coalition, his holographic form projected simultaneously in command centers across Earth and Mars. The quantum display behind him showed footage from humanity's first major victory at the Peterson-Martinez colony. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the weight of command. "The Council has responded exactly as our psychological profiles predicted. They've labeled our defense of Mars as unexpected aggressive behavior from a previously docile species." A ripple of cold amusement passed through his audience. The display shifted to show real-time tactical data. Council warships were mobilizing throughout the sector, their movements following patterns documented in conflicts spanning thousands of years. The Council's military doctrine remained as rigid as ever, and just as predictable. Their response force is substantial. Commander Elizabeth Reed reported, her neural interface streaming data to the assembled leaders. 17 capital ships, 42 support vessels, standard Council battle formation, unchanged since their hegemony wars. Walker nodded, watching the Council fleets approach. "Show me the Thermopylae gamut." The tactical display transformed, overlaying ancient Greek battle formations onto the approaching Council fleet. The narrow pass of Thermopylae became a gravitational corridor between Jupiter's moons. The Persian army transformed into Council warships. "They're so convinced of their superiority that they're walking right into it," Elizabeth said, highlighting key tactical positions. "Their doctrine demands they press their advantage through the most direct route. They don't even consider alternatives." The Admiral activated a secure channel to the Leviathan shipworks. Status of Project Hydra. Dr. Alexandra Martinez's image appeared, her lab coat marked with the grease and wear of hands-on engineering. "The mining laser conversions are complete. We've adapted the Council's captured shield frequencies from Mars. They won't expect their own technology to be turned against them, especially not by primitive mining equipment." Walker smiled grimly. Throughout human space, civilian infrastructure was revealing its hidden nature. Atmospheric processors became electronic warfare platforms. Terraforming equipment transformed into weapon systems. Every piece of technology humanity had developed served dual purposes, and the Council had dismissed them all. "New contact," Elizabeth announced suddenly. "Council command ship entering the system. Quantum Wake signature matches their Supreme War Leader's vessel." The tactical display updated, showing a massive crystalline ship emerging from quantum space. Its design spoke of millennia of unchanging tradition, every aspect following the Council's rigid military doctrine. "They've sent their best commander to deal with us," Walker observed, studying the vessel's capabilities. "They think overwhelming force will remind us of our fear." "Sir," Elizabeth interrupted, her neural feed flashing urgent data, "we're detecting energy signatures consistent with their planetary submission protocols. They're preparing to target Earth directly." The command center fell silent. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment when humanity would show its true nature. Walker's neural interface connected him to every military commander in the system, his words reaching all of human space simultaneously. Initiate Operation Odysseus. Across the solar system, humanity's preparation became devastatingly clear. Asteroid mining operations revealed themselves as fortress platforms. Civilian ships shed their disguises, showing weapon systems derived from centuries of theoretical warfare studies. Research stations transformed into electronic warfare platforms that turned the Council's own communication networks against them. "The Council believes we document wars out of fear," Walker said, watching humanity's true military capability emerge. "They never understood that we study war so thoroughly because we respect it. Every conflict in our history taught us something. Every battle added to our understanding. We don't fear war, we master it." The tactical display showed Council ships encountering human defenses that adapted faster than their combat eye could analyze. Weapons they had dismissed as primitive revealed devastating capabilities. Tactics they had never encountered, drawn from Earth's vast military history, disrupted their carefully planned formations. "Send word to all commands," Walker ordered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of human military preparation. "The Council wanted to teach us about warfare. Instead, they're about to learn why humanity's dedication to peace was never about fear, it was about wisdom. And they're about to understand the difference." Supreme War Leader Vexthor watched in mounting horror as his combat analysis systems struggled to process the human battle strategies. His crystalline command chip's quantum processors, designed to handle millennia of documented warfare tactics, were overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human combat patterns. On his main display, Commander Michael O'Connor's forces executed another impossible maneuver. Human ships moved like predators, their formations mimicking hunting patterns that Vexthor's tactical systems couldn't recognize. Analysis complete, his second-in-command reported, multiple appendages working across holographic controls. The humans are using combat patterns based on their planet's apex predators. This particular assault mirrors the hunting strategy of something called a snow leopard. Vexthor's sensory crests flared in frustration. They're adapting animal behavior for space combat. Impossible. No civilized species would. New attack pattern detected. The warning cut through his protest. On the tactical display, human vessels executed a pincer movement that shouldn't have been possible with their level of technology. Their supposedly primitive mining lasers had been modified to exploit weaknesses in Council shield configurations that had been standard for thousands of years. "How are they breaching our defenses?" Vexthor demanded, watching another squadron fall to the humans' unpredictable tactics. His tactical officer's appendages trembled as she reported, "They're not following any known combat doctrine, Supreme Leader. Each engagement teaches them. They adapt, improve, transform their strategies in real time." The massive view screen showed O'Connor's flagship emerging from Jupiter's radiation belt, where no ship should have been able to survive. The human vessels had modified their shields based on research into Earth's extremophile organisms, creating defense systems that thrived in conditions that would cripple Council technology. Their combat AI must be extraordinarily advanced, Vexthor reasoned, seeking comfort in technological explanations. "No AI detected," his analysis officer countered. "They're doing this through neural interfaces tied directly to human combat specialists. Their tactical decisions are based on something they call intuition, a concept our xenopsychologists are still struggling to understand." Commander O'Connor's voice cut through their secure channels, the human's tone carrying an edge of satisfaction. "We studied your tactics for months while you watched us fumble with primitive technology. Did you never wonder why a species that supposedly feared war maintained such extensive combat research divisions?" Vexthor watched as human ships executed another devastating attack run. Their formation was based on ancient Earth cavalry charges, adapted for three-dimensional space warfare in a way that made perfect, terrible sense. "Your own reports told you we documented wars out of fear," O'Connor continued, his ships moving with deadly grace. You never asked yourselves why we stored every detail, every strategy, every innovation from thousands of years of combat. The tactical display spawned multiple warnings as human vessels launched another attack. This time, they used modified terraforming equipment to alter local space conditions, creating artificial gravity eddies that scattered Vex Thor's fighter screens. Council Tactical Doctrine suggests a strategic withdrawal, his second-in-command advised, multiple eyes blinking rapidly at the mounting disaster. Vex Thor's sensory crests drooped in resignation. In 3,000 years of Council military history, no species had ever forced them to retreat. Yet here were the humans, a supposedly fear-paralyzed civilization, dismantling his fleet with centuries of accumulated combat knowledge. We misunderstood them completely, he realized, watching another squadron fall to human innovation. They don't fear war, they respect it. Every conflict in their history taught them something new. Every battle added to their understanding. They've been preparing for this moment for their entire existence. Commander O'Connor's final transmission echoed through the Council command ship as Vex Thor ordered the retreat. You thought our dedication to peace was weakness. Now you understand. We work so hard to avoid war precisely because we know how devastating we can be when we wage it. As the Council fleet retreated through quantum space, Vex Thor began composing his report to the High Council. How could he explain that the species they had dismissed as fearful had turned out to be the most dangerous warriors the galaxy had ever encountered? Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, Earth's first true warship. Unlike the converted civilian vessels that had fought the initial battles, the Nemesis represented humanity's unrestrained military innovation. Every component, every system, every weapon had been designed with one purpose: to show the galaxy why humans practiced peace so diligently. Multiple Council signatures detected. Lieutenant Ryan Cooper announced from his neural interface station. They've brought their entire southern fleet. 87 capital ships, 200 support vessels. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. They're still using standard deployment patterns. Have they learned nothing? The Nemesis quantum processors analyzed the Council fleet's formation. After months of conflict, the alien forces still clung to their rigid military doctrine, unable to adapt to humanity's ever-evolving tactics. Council command is broadcasting, Ryan reported. They're offering terms for our surrender. Show me our response teams. The main display split into multiple feeds. Dr. James Wilson's Quantum Warfare Division had cracked the Council's communication protocols weeks ago. Now they could disrupt enemy fleet coordination with countermeasures based on ancient Earth electronic warfare techniques. Team Sherlock reports ready, Commander Lisa Rodriguez announced from her station. The Cultural Analysis Division had spent months studying Council military psychology, identifying weaknesses in their inflexible command structure. Energy spike. Ryan's warning cut through the bridge's focused atmosphere. Council fleet is charging their primary weapons, standard bombardment configuration. Sarah's neural interface connected her directly to the Nemesis's combat systems. The ship represented humanity's response to Council technology, not just copying it, but understanding and improving it. Where Council ships relied on crystalline computing, the Nemesis used quantum processors modeled on human neural networks, capable of learning and adapting during combat. Launch Operation Ghost Dance, Sarah commanded. Across the solar system, humanity's newest weapons platforms activated. What the Council had dismissed as debris from previous battles revealed themselves as autonomous combat units. Based on studies of Earth's wolf packs, they moved in coordinated groups, targeting the weak points in Council formations that rigid doctrine left exposed. Council fleet is attempting to regroup, Ryan reported. Their combat AI can't predict our attack patterns. Sarah watched as the Council ships tried to respond. Their tactics, unchanged for millennia, had no answer for warfare that evolved during battle. The Nemesis weapons combined principles from humanity's entire military history, from ancient artillery trajectories to modern quantum physics. Multiple Council vessels attempting emergency quantum jumps. Lisa announced, "Their formation is breaking." On the tactical display, Council ships scattered as humanity's wolfpack attackers struck from unexpected vectors. The aliens' rigid command structure, designed for formal fleet engagements, crumbled against asymmetric warfare refined through centuries of human conflict. "They're transmitting a general retreat order," Ryan said, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Sarah's neural interface highlighted key tactical data. The Council fleet, once the pride of their military, was in disarray. Their perfect formations had shattered against human innovation. Their standardized tactics had failed against strategies drawn from Earth's vast history of warfare. "Send word to command," she ordered. "Operation Ghost Dance is a success. The Council's southern fleet is in full retreat." The bridge crew maintained their professional composure, but Sarah felt their pride. The Nemesis represented everything the Council had failed to understand about humanity. Every system, from its adaptive shields to its learning-capable weapons, reflected humanity's approach to warfare, not as a set of unchanging rules, but as a constantly evolving challenge. "Captain," Lisa's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "High Command is forwarding tactical data from all engagements. The Council has lost 40% of their total military strength since the war began. Their remaining forces are showing signs of declining combat effectiveness." Sarah nodded, watching the Council ships flee through quantum space. "They thought war was about following doctrine. We showed them it's about adaptation, innovation, and the will to survive." As the Nemesis secured the battlefield, Sarah composed her report to High Command. The Council had finally learned why humanity's peaceful nature wasn't born of fear. It was born of the wisdom that came from understanding war's true nature. The galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Jessica Reynolds stood in the newly constructed peace chamber aboard the International Space Station, the Earth suspended like a blue jewel behind her. The chamber's quantum glass walls shifted to accommodate the approach of High Observer Cuthrix, his towering form notably less imposing than during their first meeting. "Your surrender terms are unexpected," Cuthrix said, his harmonics carrying a new note of respect. The Council's military losses had shattered more than their fleet. They had destroyed assumptions held for thousands of years. "How so?" Jessica asked, though she already knew the answer. The document floating between them in holographic form represented humanity's true nature, not fearful, but wise. "You demand no territory, no reparations, no concessions beyond mutual defense agreements and cultural exchange programs." Cuthrix's secondary eyes blinked in sequence, showing confusion. "After demonstrating such military superiority, you seek only peace." Dr. Emily Anderson stepped forward from her position beside the ambassador. "You're still thinking like the Council," she said, her voice carrying the authority of Earth's leading genopsychologist. "You see peace and war as opposites. We see them as teachers." The holographic display shifted, showing footage from the conflict. Council ships, their perfect formations shattered by human innovation. Rigid doctrine crumbling before adaptive strategy. 3,000 years of military tradition, undone by a species that had spent its history learning from every battle. "Your initial assessment wasn't entirely wrong," Emily continued. "We do document wars out of a kind of fear, not of conflict itself, but of forgetting its lessons. Every battle in our history taught us something. Every war showed us what we could become, for better or worse." Cuthrix studied the peace terms again. "Your military technology, you could have built it centuries ago. Why wait?" "Because we understood something you didn't," Jessica replied. "War isn't about doctrine or tradition. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the will to survive. We maintained peace not because we feared war, but because we respected it too much to wage it unnecessarily." The station's quantum sensors registered the arrival of more Council ships, diplomatic vessels this time, carrying representatives from species that had watched humanity's rise with growing astonishment. The Council's final assessment of humanity requires significant revision. Cothrix admitted, his harmonics carrying complex emotions. We thought your dedication to peace revealed weakness. We never considered that it might indicate strength. General Marcus Hayes, who had overseen humanity's military transformation, spoke from his position near the chamber's entrance. A species that truly fears war doesn't study it so thoroughly. They don't maintain military historians, strategists, and theorists during peacetime. They don't design every piece of civilian technology with dual purposes. The holographic display showed new images, human ships returning to civilian configurations, weapon systems powering down, military installations transitioning back to peaceful purposes, not destroyed or dismantled, transformed, just as they had transformed for war. Your terms suggest you harbor no desire for revenge, Cothrix observed. Despite our miscalculation. Jessica smiled. Revenge is born from fear and anger. We prefer understanding. The galaxy now knows humanity's true nature, not as warriors who fear peace, nor as pacifists who fear war, but as students of both. The peace treaty materialized in solid form, its quantum paper shimmering with embedded verification codes. Cothrix extended his primary appendage toward it, then hesitated. The Council must know, he said. What would you have done if we had recognized your true nature from the beginning? If we had not tried to subjugate you? The same thing we do now, Jessica replied. Offer friendship, share knowledge, and maintain peace, not because we fear war, but because we know its cost. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity's dedication to peace comes from wisdom, not weakness. Now it does. As Cothrix signed the treaty, new text appeared in the Council's synapsychological database. The entry on humanity had been completely rewritten, ending with a simple warning. They mastered peace because they perfected war. May the galaxy be wise enough never to make them demonstrate it again.